What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the opinionated hippie, continuing my deep dive into Neil Young's catalog. Doing a disc I was not planning on doing at this point in time. I was going to save this for like the end when I was going back through the catalog and filling in all the gaps with the stuff I didn't cover. But I got a nice comment after a nice long conversation requesting that I do this. And this is the old Homestead, which is not an officially released disc in an independent sense, but it comes from Archives Volume 2. And if you're on like the Reddit boards or any like discussion boards online, all the discs from the Archive series have sort of become their own like albums, mainly because a lot of them were previously released or have since been released. And in Archives 2, which is a 10 disc set, I've already discussed Tuscaloosa, which was released independently. The Roxy Tonight's the Night, released independently. Homegrown, released like apart from the box set. I'm planning on doing Doom, which got a vinyl release. I'm also going to do the Odeon Budokan live release, which was also in Archives 2. This is one of the discs, disc number 6. It's called The Old Homestead. It has not yet been officially released, but all of these are just taking on their life as like albums that could have been released. This is one that definitely is not an album that could have been released. It's essentially just a snapshot of 1974. It is 19 tracks from June 1974 to I think December 7th, right? June 15th is the first performance, all the way through December 7th, I think is the last one. December 31st, no, there's a New Year's performance. But all studio stuff, 2 live tracks, mostly studio stuff of Neil just going into various studios at various times and recording various songs, almost none of which would be released in 1974. One of the songs would be, but not the version that's on here. And the stuff that's recorded on here over these 19 tracks would see the light of day on Zuma, a live Crosby, Stills and Nash 74 box set that wouldn't come till later. An On the Beach track, a live version of On the Beach, which is fantastic. Homegrown, Hitchhiker, 2 albums that were not released in this era, but were later released that represent this era. You got a track that would appear on Broken Arrow in the 90s, and a track that would not appear until a live Blue Note Cafe release from that live sort of big band sound that he did in the 80s. So a bunch of really fascinating, interesting stuff that Neil just didn't feel like releasing at this time and put on the back burner for whatever reason. He put it on the back burner. I think there's one other album that Hawks and Doves. There's a song on here pretty much as performed here in 74 as it would be released on Hawks and Doves. So a very interesting 19 songs, because it is the way they are released on this. It is the sort of literally the chronological order that they're performed in. I don't think it has a good flow to it as an album. And I think I'll put the link in the description. But I've sort of have my own YouTube playlist of this in which I've put like the 3 meaty songs. There were 3 big songs on here, 2 live songs, a live version of Pushed It Over the End, a song about Citizen Kane Jr. blues as it was introduced when it was performed live at this rare acoustic show that I just reviewed yesterday, a couple days ago. A Crosby, Stills, Nash Young version of that is just guitar epic, completely different vibe than the acoustic version, but an absolutely amazing song. And then a live version of On the Beach, also with Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, that pretty much has the same sort of hazy vibe as the original, but a little more guitar orgy aspect thrown in there. Those are 2 of the longer songs on here. And then from Hawks and Doves, we get the Old Homestead, which Levon Helm on drums, and his drumming on this is just weird, fantastic. It's an awesome, longer diatribe song that definitely one of the highlights from Hawks and Doves. You get a couple songs that one song that appeared on Decade. But yeah, anyways, what I was saying, I have a YouTube playlist in which I separate those songs and make those sort of the anchors of the album, and rearrange some of the songs. But it's just a fascinating listen, and there's some absolutely fantastic stuff on here. One song appears on here 3 times, Love Art Blues, and this is where the interesting part about the chronology plays in, because the first version is just Neil and a guitar and a harmonica. It's probably the most powerful version. It's the most straightforward, obviously. It's the most simple. It's Love Art Blues. It's kind of Neil laying out his sort of like his artist, his approach as an artist, and like the idea of how he is so intertwined in his art. Just, it's in the title, Love/Art Blues. It also, you get 3 versions of this, and each version has more instrumentation and becomes a lighter, happier, more upbeat song as we go on, which kind of maybe feels like how 74 goes for Neil, as he like records these deep, dark albums and gets this stuff out of his system. His whole like worldview changes, his approach to art, or his need for why he needs to create art, becomes something different. And you can almost track that through Love Art Blues. My only complaint is the first song is Love Art Blues, but then we don't get the other 2 versions until the 15th and the 19th song, which is when they were recorded. It would have been cool had the other version been more in the middle as far as the album goes, to see that progression as he sort of rises from the depths of his darkness, into the light at the end. But the last song is the sort of pedal steel guitar, kind of lighter, bouncier, more upbeat version. And that's the last song on this, 19. And then the first song is the deep, darker, more just personal acoustic version. So that chronology works out really, really well. So that's what opens the disc, is this Love Art Blues. And then you get a previously an unreleased version of Through My Sails, which is the closing track on Zuma. This is just a solo acoustic version. I like this version much better. I think it's gentler. It's a little more intimate. It doesn't have more of a, for me, Through My Sails closes that album on sort of almost like a throwaway vibe after Cortez. Like, hey, I'm just going to give you something light, and let's just end this thing on a light, we're going home type vibe. This sparser version, not necessarily starker version, I think works better. I think the song strengths shine through a little more. Got a song called Home Fires, nice, gentle, upbeat acoustic vibe. We get another version of Part in My Heart, which was also on Zuma. This one feels a little bit mellower, just some very sparse bass, Neil on acoustic. Doesn't have quite the same slightly optimistic bounce that the official version has, but still fascinating listen. Probably for me, the weakest track on here by far is Hawaiian Sunrise, an acoustic version, guitar and bass. I think they were doing this song on the Crosby, Stills and Nash tour. It has this Hawaiian vibe, but it's pretty sincere. It's not like making fun of it, like say the Kinks. What is that song? Holiday in Waikiki. It's Neil flirting with different kind of musical subgenres, and I don't know. I just think it's the really only throwaway track on here that I can almost do without, just because that Hawaiian vibe almost is cliched, especially because this is the 70s, and as we're going to find out on the next official album I do from his release catalog, he's definitely in that sort of light 70s, let's sing songs about, hooking up and girls and stuff like that. And this seems to be leaning in that direction. LA Girls and Ocean Boys, one of only 2, I think, songs on here that is just him and a piano. Amazing song. Lyrics dealing with a broken relationship. She spent the night with another guy. Just an awesome 2.5 minutes of beauty. Why this was not released, I don't know. This is a fantastic song. And then we get what is, I don't know, doesn't really fit on this side of music, but are easily 2 of the highlights. We get a live version of Pushed It Over the End, which was for the most part, an unreleased song. You know, in the official canon, it's been released in various like live projects. We got it released on Citizen Kane Jr. Blues as an acoustic version. It's a song that was inspired by Patty Hearst and her exploits with the law and running against the law and being kidnapped and all that stuff. Yeah, really fascinating live, weird, disjointed guitar, different, sort of a mini epic. The vibe is kind of all over the place, but there's lots of really good live guitar on here. And yeah, just this awesome funky groove in this. It's a really super awesome jammy middle section that's fantastic. 7.5+ minutes of just incredible live music. And that's followed by a live version of On the Beach. And I probably prefer there's a drunken, slightly hazy quality about the studio version that I think is a little more compelling, but this is fantastic. Like if I saw this live, my mind would be blown. Lots of guitar, nice jamming in here. The band does a fantastic job. We do get some hand percussion in there at some point, which gives it a Virgin on a Santana vibe every once in a while, but who cares? We overcome that easily. But those two songs, which are like 15+ minutes, are kind of like, feel like the heart of this, even though nothing else on here is live. But coming back to back in the middle, they just seem to be this weight that everything else kind of centers around. From shows in August in 74. Then we get back into like some of the solo stuff. We get Vacancy, a song that would eventually find its release on Homegrown decades later. Really nice acoustic song, some very upbeat urgency to it. Great vibe, great song. One More Sign, which would eventually be released on like a Buffalo Springfield box set, like an early version of it. Pretty good song, piano solo song. The other song on here that's just piano solo. Frozen Man, fantastic song. I don't think this had been released at all. Little up-tempo, great vibe, sort of an acoustic, jaunty, just kneeling a guitar. Really awesome bounce and energy to the song. Probably one of the highlights on here. Like a lot of highlights, but as far as the stuff that had, the songs that had never been heard of, I think Frozen Man kind of rises to the top as like the things you should check out. Like if this stuff had been culled to create like an actual album at the time, that version of Vacancy, that Frozen Man, that LA Girls, there's a number of songs on here, which I think would have made a really strong, like 40-minute album. Give Me Strength is next, which would eventually appear on Hitchhiker. Nice, solid country folk type song. Acoustic. I think there's some piano on here too. I don't think it's a live performance. I think it's like a studio compelled performance maybe. But that's a good little song. Bad News Comes to Town. This is the one that would eventually appear on that live Blue Notes Cafe album in like decade and a half later. This has a very quiet, late night, sitting around the fireplace, kind of sad, kind of intimate, kind of, hey, let's keep things a little hush vibe to it. Pretty cool. We get Changing Highways, which would not pop up until the 90s on Broken Arrow. This is with Crazy Horse. Has a nice, just like country stroll to it, some harmonica vibes. Pretty good song. I think it worked better on Broken Arrow amidst all those big, epic, loud, noisy, poorly produced monsters. But here it's pretty neat to hear. We get a second version of Love Art Blues, which now we've added a bass and a dobro, so it's got a little more bounce, a little more energy to it. Definitely loses some of its power, I think, as you add the instruments, and doesn't have quite that immediate, intimate connection that the opening version does on this. And then we get the old Homestead, the version that appears on Hawks and Doves. This almost 8-minute sort of sprawling kind of little mini epic that's just absolutely fantastic. Apparently it's an allegory about Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. There's moments where it just kind of seems to like fall apart at times, and then it comes back together, and it almost feels like it's not the official version, but it's the rehearsal. But no, this is what was released. yeah, just a really awesome song. And to hear it in this context on this album, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting that he saved this for Hawks and Doves. Like he just needed something on that album, and this was good. We get a song called Daughters, nice waltzy vibe, country folk, some pedal steel, some nice backup vocals. I think this was previous unreleased. I don't think this has appeared on anything else. Deep Forbidden Lake, which saw its release on Decade. Nice early 70s vibe. This definitely sounds like an early 70s song. And then we get the last version of Love Art Blues, which is just way more upbeat. We got a full band here, pedal steel guitar, some bass, some drums, some Wurlitzer. And it's a whole different song. And it seems like Neil's in a completely different place in December than he was in June. And it's pretty interesting. That's the interesting thing about this, is to watch an artist in real time, like record music, re-record music, just come up with ideas, go into the studio, lay them down, not use them immediately, but maybe recognize that, hey, I have to put this down now before I lose the inspiration for it, and might use it in an album, I might not, but it's going to be there in the vault waiting. So yeah, just an absolutely fascinating listen. I think this is one of those albums that the deeper you are into Neil Young, the more you will enjoy this. And I think that since it's only available on Archives Volume 2, which is an absolutely 10 amazing discs of music, and you cannot go wrong with the purchase of it. I think this is one of those you kind of save towards the end. You absorb the more mainstream stuff on here, the sort of the albums that compile. There are discs on here that compile like things that have been released that are more like common in the canon, live versions, or just the actual studio versions of songs. This is the one you kind of save towards the end. Once you get a sense of what he was already doing in 73, 74, 75, you come to this and it just shows a whole different side of what could have been. And it's just a fascinating listen. And it is definitely one of the, like, for the deep dive Neil Youngers, I think one of they're all enjoyable discs. That these archive box sets are home runs, but it's one of those that's like, maybe an inside the park home run. It's like, wow, he did it. He pulled it off. He made it. It's absolutely fantastic. But yeah, really enjoy this. Apparently I wonder if that is the actual old Homestead right there. I don't know if it is or not, but it's quaint and cozy. All right. That's all I got. Yeah, I would encourage you to, it is streaming if you do the streaming thing. So I'm sure you can find it on YouTube. I will put a link in the description to my YouTube music version of it, in which I've rearranged the songs and what I think tells a slightly better story, as far as it does mix the chronology around. But I think having the live songs separated and the longer songs as sort of anchors throughout makes for a slightly more intriguing listen. I don't know. That's what I listen to now, just to like mix things up. But anyways, that's all I got. Give me your thoughts on this album. If you check it out, if you haven't checked it out, all that kind of stuff. Subscribe, like, share, comment. And yeah, thanks for watching. Peace. Talk to you later.